The Badlands. What are the Badlands? Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Daily Herold here on Badlands Media. I am your host, John Herold, and I think I got a pretty good show lined up for you guys today. We are going to be discussing that signal leak story with Gabrielle Cuccia from OAN. She's the Pentagon chief Pentagon correspondent, so I think we're going to get some good insight. But before we bring her on, I want to play our sponsor, and then I'm going to read through some of the story, and then we'll have her on to discuss. So let's start out with a little Mike Lindell.
I hear every day about the products you all wish MyPillow carried. Well, guess what? We probably do. Slippers, bathrobes, pet beds, blankets, mattresses, sleepwear, loungewear, duvets, comforters, pot holders, aprons, oven mitts, and so much more. And they're all on sale. For example, get our best-selling standard MyPillows for only $14.98. Body pillows, $29.98. 6-piece bath towels or kitchen towel sets, just $29.98. Multi-use MyPillow 2.0s with pillowcase, $9.98. Save $40 on our Spring Percale and Giza Dream bedsheet sets. Any size, any color, and so much more. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save up to 80% on all MyPillow products. And I've never done this before. When you spend $100 or more, you're going to get 2 standard MyPillows absolutely free.
All right. Thank you, Mike Lindell, for being a sponsor of the show. And thank you to those watching for supporting our sponsors. It's a great way to support us here at Badlands Media. I already see people in the chat saying the Atlantic story, like what's going on? And I'm going to fill you in. This is probably one of the weirdest stories I've heard in a while, which is saying something considering the news cycle we live through every day. Yesterday, was it even? It might have even been 2 days ago. I don't remember. March 24th. So this was yesterday. It was right around the time we were going live on here, or maybe a little bit before. And so that's why I didn't cover it yesterday. But the Trump administration and some of the officials accidentally included Jeffrey Goldberg from The Atlantic in their Signal messaging group. And I'm going to read through the story, and then we'll bring on Gabrielle to discuss it. The world found out shortly before 2 p.m. Eastern on March 15th that the United States was bombing Houthi targets across Yemen. I, however, knew 2 hours before the first bombs exploded that the attack might be coming. The reason I knew is that Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, had texted me the war plan at 11:44 a.m. The plan included precise information about weapons packages, targets, and timing. On March 11th, he received a connection request on Signal from Michael Waltz, that's Trump's NSA, and he thought he paints this story as if he wasn't sure at the beginning whether or not it was legit. Like he thought he was being scammed or something. They were trying to trap him with a fake news story, which is interesting. He was even concerned about that because, stuff like that happens. But there's all sorts of people in here. Rubio was in it, allegedly, Vance, and some of their subordinates. Tulsi Gabbard, DNI Gabbard. We had CIA Director Ratcliffe, Scott Bessent, Pete Hegseth. I'm just listening through some names here. The principals that apparently assembled, in all, 18 individuals were listed as members of this Signal chat group, including various National Security Council officials, Steve Witkoff, President Trump's Middle East and Ukraine negotiator, Susie Wiles, the White House Chief of Staff, and someone identified only as SM, which Jeff Goldberg thinks was Stephen Miller. Would make sense. At 8:05 on Friday, Mike Waltz started texting the group, "Team, you should have a statement of conclusions with taskings per the president's guidance this morning in your high side inboxes." High side refers to classified computer and communication systems. JD Vance responded, "Team, I am out for the day doing an economic event in Michigan, but I think we're making a mistake." The Vance account goes on to state 3% of U.S. trade runs through the Suez, 40% of European trade does. There is a real risk that the public doesn't understand this or why it's necessary. The strongest reason to do this, as POTUS said, is to send a message. And that was probably one of the most interesting things for me was the framing. It almost made it look like JD Vance was kind of at odds with Trump. Oops, I don't want that one. Let's do that one. There we go. Sorry, I'm just getting my setting here set up correctly. But yeah, the JD Vance being at odds with Trump, that was in the Signal messages. So take that for what it is. Maybe we'll discuss more with Gabrielle. But it goes on, and let me find the meat of this, and this is where the entire left and all these politicians, everybody's freaking out because of what was supposedly discussed in these messages. Let me get down to right here. So this is at 11:44 a.m. on March 15th, Saturday, March 14th. Pete Hegseth posted in Signal team update. And then Goldberg says, I will not quote from this update or from certain other subsequent texts. The information contained in them, if they had been read by an adversary of the United States, could conceivably have been used to harm American military and intelligence personnel, particularly in the broader Middle East, Central Command's area of responsibility. What I will say, in order to illustrate the shocking recklessness of this Signal conversation, is that the Hegseth post contained operational details of forthcoming strikes on Yemen, including information about targets, weapons the U.S. would be deploying, and attack sequencing. And then there's pictures of it in here too. So as of now, it does appear that these are confirmed to be legit. Like it was an actual ongoing Signal conversation that somehow this guy Goldberg got invited into. And I think I'm just going to play one clip to remind you of who Goldberg is and stuff he's done in the past, because I think there's a possibility not everything he is saying is truthful. Like the stuff he's leaving out, unless we see what that stuff is, I don't think we have any reason to take Goldberg's word for it that it was actual battle plans and classified information. And this is what I'm talking about. This was back in 2020 when he used the architect of the Suckers and Losers hoax. Just a quick clip, and then we'll bring Gabrielle on.
For your story, it hurts. It hurts to read these quotes aloud from the President of the United States disparaging veterans. Can you take us just into your reporting and why you felt confident publishing this?
Well, I felt confident publishing it because I have multiple sources with firsthand knowledge of the president's views and comments. That's the only reason to publish anything. And I felt it was important to publish because in my experience, in our collective experience, I don't think we've had a president who has contempt for American soldiers, wounded veterans, people who've been killed in action.
All right. Now with that, let's bring on Gabrielle Cuccia. How are you, Gabrielle?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. What a trip down memory lane to even see that clip. It's been buried at the bottom of my brain cells. Yeah, I was happy to not hear about Russia hoax and all that stuff for a while, but here we are.
Anything with Brian Stelter should be buried at the bottom of your brain cells. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind giving a little background of yourself, because you were formerly a White House correspondent, and then, after Trump left, I think you left, and then you came back. So
Yeah. Well, I actually started at the White House right out of college, working in White House IT. I was doing hardware and software development. And then I was retained during during transition. So when Obama was cleaning up and the Trump administration was coming on in, I was retained. There was only a few of us in the technical sector. Long story, but they weren't renewing contracts of certain personnel. At that point, it was khaki, which is really prominent over here in Washington. And there was a few of us civilians that were coordinating with White House Communications Agency, which is more or less a lot of military, like radio guys working on network infrastructure. So I was retained to oversee transition, stuck around for the Trump administration, worked for the First Lady for a little bit on the technical side. Wow. Yeah, and then worked on executive orders, anything the president signs from start to finish. So it's kind of funny, even down to when it's actually printed off your computer, handed over to the president, he signs it, we would disseminate and do a press release for press. So we read those drafts, at least 3 times out loud to each other in the executive clerk's office. So to be able to see at the core of whatever is being signed, whether it's a memo or a directive, and knowing everything about it, when you have NSC involved and general counsel, and then to see it be disseminated towards press and it be received in a different way than its intent was always really interesting. But yeah, I did that, was at the White House for Obama, Trump, was a security contractor. And in the interim between that time, I also was a White House correspondent for OAN. And now I've come back 6 years later to be the Pentagon correspondent. So it's been fun.
That's interesting. I'm a huge fan of executive orders. I spent a lot of time on the Federal Register. I think I read every single one of Trump's first term executive orders multiple times. But anyway, that's besides the point. You're at the Pentagon now, and this story is very focused on the Pentagon and the national security aspect.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, what is your thoughts about this? I mean, it does appear genuine, right?
Yeah, it appears genuine. So even actually right now on Capitol Hill, right before you and I hopped on, there was a hearing with FBI Kash Patel, DNI Tulsi Gabbard, and CIA Director John Radcliffe. in which they were talking about just the scope of the security threat the US faces now and their evaluations of China specifically. So it was outside of course, the Signal leak. But of course, that naturally had to come up during the hearings, of which they confirmed that this was a real leak. So it genuinely was an accident. And, you know, of course, I hate that for the administration. I would hate it for any administration, just like to put that on the record, right? I'm an American first and a constitutionalist first. So I want this country to succeed and protect itself. So it was a flub. What you saw between yesterday and today is a little bit more of a symbiotic relationship between administration officials actually coordinating their responses. Specifically, DNI Director Tulsi Gabbard, she had said refer back to the Department of Defense for what the information was to be included. But both Gabbard and Ratcliffe were saying that they explicitly did not utilize any classified information within this Signal chat. But the whole thing of the Signal story in general opens up to me. I mean, yes, so a few points, right? Like it was a flub, and sure, it's embarrassing. This has happened in the past for sure. I have other reporter friends who have accidentally been included in Signal chats in the past for information that they weren't necessarily to be privy to. But the other element is that Signal has been utilized by the United States government wide since 2014. OCONUS or CONUS. Yeah, so a lot of people, there's two facets of who utilizes Signal. It's either people on the commercial side who are utilizing it, say they have significant others that are in government practices and they're being told to use Signal, as they have been since 2014. Or it's, again, still on the commercial side, it's people who know WhatsApp is, you know, a Trojan horse, quite literally, if you talk about Israelis, program, the Trojan, in which if you have WhatsApp on your phone, it's basically a portal into every single thing that's on there without you knowing. So there's always been this pivot away from WhatsApp to Signal nationwide, but globally as well. But from the government aspect, we've been utilizing it since 2014. During the Biden administration, it was permissible to download Signal on White House communication devices. And back when I worked in IT, I helped handle the cell phones that were given out to the staff of the White House. So there are certain apps that are and are not approved. Signal was one of them. And I can tell you for certain, which is a really important element of when you talk about whether or not the information in there was classified. If it is, I do appreciate that that classified information wasn't shared. It comes at the height of the Pentagon just last week issuing a memo in which they will be investigating and taking action on anyone that disseminates classified information willingly, right? Thank you. There you go. This is a nice little setup you got going on. So even right there, maybe they got ahead of it and they knew this was coming out. Maybe they didn't. But either way, it obviously across the board with this administration under so much scrutiny, so much different than this last administration, you see a pivot towards wanting to clean house and remove leakers of any sort. Yeah. So I do think this was a genuine accident. But the question isn't whether or not this affected operations towards the Houthis for Yemen air precision strikes, because they were successful, right? Which is a great thing. But more of the question I want to focus on is the single apparatus as a whole, because the issue with the government, I mean, you can look at outside of DOD, which they also utilize, but the agencies, the intel agencies, everybody's saying, oh, how could you put any information in Signal? But I can tell you the Central Intelligence Agency certainly utilizes Signal, and they use it overseas. Even on their COVCOM communications, they have certain profiles that allow Signal to do quick turnaround communication for their operations in different capacities that I technically can't go into. But this is used far and wide. You could go to the FARM, CIA training headquarters over in Virginia, and everyone's got Signal on their phone. So the essence of how could this ever be utilized, I would say it always has been. There was even a point in time, not to go down too far in the weeds, that Signal has had so many data breaches. So even when I say the Biden administration rolled it out and said it's good to go on White House communication phones, at that same time, that was around 2023 and 2022. This is just one example that there was a massive Signal breach. But despite that, CISA came out with a report urging government professionals, and you can read about it, hit it on the Googler, for government professionals to utilize Signal first and foremost, despite those security breaches. So all in all, to say, this isn't some rogue application. I think this was a genuine mistake. You've seen now the administration is kind of trying to get their ducks in a row. There you go. Yeah, That's what I'm talking about.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So this is super common. Unfortunately, not common in the sense of you have such high level officials. I do think that there is an element of interest in the fact that some of these people in the chat had, again, this is usually when you're talking about sensitive information, to have full names written out or even photos coordinating with that account. That tends to not be common practice, at least in the intelligence community. It's usually on a burner phone, Signal will be utilized. They'll obfuscate what their full name is. And again, even on COVCOM, there's never a 100% guarantee. Yep, as you see here, even just saying Houthi small group, like it was a little surprising. Again, I don't know what their COVCOM looks like. I'm certain
COVCOM?
Covert communication.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm certain that these personnel have issued COVCOM that they're utilizing while working with these chats. But even so, no matter what entity you're working for and whatever COVCOM you're utilizing, most commonly, everything that's discussed is always told, even if it's a quote unquote classified tool, there's no classified information. And so I would just say, for the argument of whether or not there was actual classified information, it's tough. I appreciate if there's none that's been leaked, but then there's the other element of, the likes of, Gabbard or Hegseth and all of them. They've been issued those COVCOMs and have to, read a brief about it, sign for it, and have the understanding that there will be no classified information shared on these communication devices. So there's still a lot up in the air, but it just, outside of that, of course, I'm a journalist, so I want to talk about the facts, but it's tough to see this situation because, again, we saw 4 years of just turning a blind eye completely. And so this I would characterize as somewhat more of a flub than anything else. However, now you have the whole media apparatus they're not going to let this one up. They're going to drive it to the ground. They're going to be calling for firings. And I know that people were talking about Steve Witkoff, whether he'd be removed or not. I've seen reports that it's likely he would not be. But again,
Witkoff or Waltz?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Waltz.
Waltz. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
There's so many interesting things I want to say now. You touched on so many
I went through a lot.
really good points though. So first of all, let's do this one. This memo, which I hadn't seen before now, is very interesting. The timing of it, because it came after the leak. According to Goldberg in his story, he left the chat after the bombings happened. And so that probably would have alerted people, that, hey, this guy was in there. What was he doing in there? The fact he got included in the first place is just mind blowing. It's almost like they had to have done it on purpose. It doesn't make sense. But whether or not that's true, I thought it was really interesting this morning what Ratcliffe said, because the question is whether or not there was classified, communications in there. Yeah. And he specifically said my communications were entirely permissible and lawful. He didn't say the or all the communications. So I'm going to play this clip quick.
Statement: the Signal is a secure channel.
No, can I answer that? It is.
I've got a series
end-to-end encryption. So
it is. I understand encryption.
It is permissible to use to communicate and coordinate for work purposes, provided, Senator, that any decisions that are made are also recorded through formal channels. Right. So those were procedures that were implemented. My staff implemented those processes, followed those processes, complied with those processes, and finally, just please. So my communications, to be clear, in a Signal message group were entirely permissible and lawful and did not include classified information.
Well,
I just think it's really interesting how he specified his communications. Didn't touch on anybody else's. So,
well, John, I'll even say the same nature or the same approach was taken by Tulsi Gabbard as well, in which she spoke specifically to DNI components and then said after the fact, I would refer those questions to the Department of Defense. So it's just a really interesting, of course, there's a lot of heartburn for this. But an interesting way to see how these top administration officials are trying to coordinate as best as they can and be careful with their words. I mean, this is just politics kind of in a nutshell. I think it's fair to have an investigation. And the National Security Council even said that they were going to have an investigation. So I don't anticipate this going away. And then ultimately, it's kind of, President Trump's decision on how he acts following the information or following the investigation, maybe even before. I mean, we all know that he is confident in his choices in people and in action. So it's kind of left on the table at this point. But I will say Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, did issue out a tweet earlier today in which it appears that they're trying to massage the messaging of exactly what's going on here as you pulled it. See, this is so nice. I like this. I wish I had this when I was doing news. I like this.
Yeah, StreamYard makes it really easy. But
yeah, but as you see, even that first point, no war plans were discussed. That's the same thing that Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth said yesterday while he's on his Indo-PACOM trip. And that just seems to be the echoed sentiment here outside of, I mean, no one's necessarily confirmed that they accidentally added Goldberg or how that could have even happened. But I will note you had allegedly 18 people in that Signal chat. And, you know, the way that Signal works, it's kind of easy to accidentally just drop someone in the weeds of it. I do find it interesting that he departed the chat. It appears from his recount that he had departed the chats once the strikes had happened for fear of having this access to information. But as a journalist, I would probably, notify the chains of command of whoever's involved in that chat and stick around until some of the, one of the formal government staffers, whoever's involved, removed me myself just to kind of gain more context, have more information, and supply it to not be, supply it to the government entities that are involved to say, hey, I was on this, because you do want to absolve yourself of any nefarious activity. But it's an interesting one for sure.
It really is. And the left, they've been looking for any excuse they can to go after the Trump administration because they've been on a roll, and they're going to capitalize on this. And I wonder where it ultimately ends. Like, they're already asking for the resignation of both Hegseth and Walz. I wonder if they go further, if they do some sort of investigation or something.
As an American, the result I would like to see is a pivot from not necessarily relying on a commercial app like like Signal. In that tweet that you had pulled up earlier, my point and my focus that I would like to maintain is how does government agencies wide bolster covert communication in an effective cross-sharing way? Because what happens is, especially in the intelligence community, there is such brainiacs, truly, just to put it blunt. There are so many smart people in tech within the intelligence community that have nearly perfected CovCom. So much so that you could travel to Moscow and someone could obtain your phone. And if some sort of police officer or some official at an airport were to confiscate your phone, those things can self-wipe and they protect themselves. Like, there is a lot of meticulous tradecraft vulnerabilities that are assessed and then deflected and have been done successfully. So if certain groups within the IC have that, why is that not available for, say, your top government officials? Why are we relying on Signal? I think there's another question, another piece there. And I think maybe how you turn this around is the Trump administration becomes the first administration government-wide to really perfect the craft of CovCom all across the board, because it's there. A lot of times the reason it's not there right now for everyone to utilize is, one, they don't know about it, or two, they know about it and they don't have access to it, whether it's because it's from a specific government contractor that establishes some stipulations over intellectual property, or only gives it to one particular client that has the deep enough pockets to facilitate that. So that's, as high level and as digestible as I can explain. I think we're hitting a flashpoint of what the government, what operations, what sensitivities on the classified side have been missing all along. And we're finally catching up with it. So I would even say this Trump administration has kind of just entered into it. You're being told, imagine your first day within any intelligence entity, say the CIA, and they just hand you a phone and you believe it and you think that everyone has access to that that's at the same clearance level as you. And then you realize, no, actually, these top government officials are still utilizing Signal. So that's a whole other element to the story that I would like to focus on a lot more. And I'm hopeful that it turns some of the SOPs around for, sensitive cross-sharing of information.
SOP, standard operating?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. Well, I really appreciate your insight here. And there was another story that I think we should have you back on another time to discuss, because I have a whole bunch of other news to get through. So where can people find you, Gabrielle?
You can find me at Gabby Cuccia on X, and then Gabrielle Cuccia. It's with the, certain characters you can't use on X versus Instagram or whatever. Anyways, Gabrielle Cuccia on Instagram, Gabby Cuccia on X. And thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It's a lot going on here.
Absolutely. We'll get you back on again soon. Thank you.
you.
Appreciate it. That was great. That was very informative. My mind is like all over the place right now. There's so many avenues that we should have just made that a full hour, but there's other stuff I got to get through. So we'll definitely have to have her back on again. Her tech background too in that area is so it just makes it that much more interesting. She has the IT background specifically with the White House, and so that's perfect for this. That was great. Okay, let's keep plugging away here through the news. I do want to play. I thought there was one more clip I had related to this story. Yeah, this was Hegseth yesterday. His response, and he seems a little annoyed. He's pretty upset about this.
Information about war plans against the Houthis in Yemen was shared with a journalist in The Atlantic, and were those details classified?
You're talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again, to include the hoaxes of Russia, or the fine people on both sides hoax, or suckers and losers hoax. So this is the guy that peddles in garbage. This is what he does. I would love to comment on the Houthi campaign because of the skill and courage of our troops. I've monitored it very closely from the beginning. And you see, we've been managing 4 years of deferred maintenance.
So he kind of deflects a little bit. The fact that they use Signal when they have other technology available, it does kind of blow my mind. Like it makes me think that this was some sort of like coordinate, like, hey, we're gonna set them up. I just don't see the end game yet. So part of me is wanting to let's wait 72 hours, see what happens. And but I don't know, like it's hard for me to see the end game if this was a trap. Like you're gonna trap Michael or Jeffrey Goldberg at the Atlantic. Like the mainstream media at this point, in my opinion, is they're basically clinging to relevancy. They're irrelevant. The mainstream media, the trust in the mainstream media is at its lowest point ever. Do you really need to trap them any further? Like what's the end game with that? If anything, this story is giving them more relevancy because it's been confirmed that it was a legitimate signal messaging exchange. Whether or not there's classified info, we'll probably find out. Trump has come out in support of Waltz and says he still supports him. It was a mistake, all these things. And yeah, it definitely was a mistake. And another aspect to this too, I mean, he got the messages that they're going to go forward with this attack. And then a couple hours later, 2 hours later, they ended up doing it. And very shortly after that, Trump was on Truth Social posting about it. I don't think it was really a secret necessarily that Trump was going to come out here and bomb the Houthis. I don't think they were shying away from that fact. One of the bigger takeaways that I've seen on social media is people talking about, the whole thing was a trap to get him to post this stuff so that Europe could see what the administration thinks of them. And I think it was cynical. Let me see if I can find him here. Yeah, cynical Publius, whatever, however you say that word, is the one who posted this. If I can find it. He had like a post with like 3-point-some million views. No, I can't find it. What the heck? You know what? Who shared it? It was Storm has arrived. Okay, right here. Regarding the Signal chat in the Atlantic article, the minute I read the chat, my very first thought was that that Goldberg was specifically and deliberately included so that he would leak what he saw to the public. The idea was to let Europe know just how unhappy American leadership is with Europe's willingness to pull its weight militarily. The backchannel seemingly accidental nature of that reveal was powerful and I believe intentional. I understand this point, but also Trump has been direct about this, and he's been direct about this for like 8 years. Like Europe needs to start pulling its own weight. Europe needs to start doing its own thing. they've never been afraid to publicly besmirch Europe all over the place. Like, so I don't think that's what this is. It could be, very well could be. I have no idea. I'm just kind of spitballing here in my head. It's just hard for me to imagine this being a trap. I think it was an accident. I'd be more concerned. Why does Mike Waltz have Goldberg in his Rolodex at all? Like, why is he in communication with the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic to an extent that you have his number and are even able to accidentally include him in a discussion like that? But yeah, Gabrielle is right. I think the discussion moving forward should be, how do we prevent stuff like this from happening? There should be a better way than a Signal app on your phone. You know what I mean? So anyway, we'll keep plugging away. But as I said, Trump stands by National Security Advisor Waltz after disclosing of military plans on messaging app. He said on the phone call with NBC that Michael Waltz has learned a lesson and he's a good man. So we'll see what happens. We got this from Technofog. He says that they have received President Biden's written answers to Special Counsel Hur. And there's some highlighted parts in here. It leaves little doubt that he lied, though prosecuting those lies would have been another matter. Would love to see the actual videotapes here. And I think people even commented about that. He said he's working on it. But the transcripts are out there as written questions. I'd encourage you to go read it. I'm not going to do it now because I'm a little behind schedule here, I think. But some other news here. We'll keep plugging away. So this morning was the testimony. They might even still be going out. I don't know how long that testimony was supposed to go, but the U.S. intelligence chiefs were testifying before the Senate on global security threats. I listened to about 10 minutes tops, and it was when Ratcliffe was up there. Well, first of all, actually, there was like a Code Pink protester that got thrown out, and the last thing she was talking about, or whoever it was saying, you know, you got to stop funding Israel, stop sending money to Israel, which that I totally agree with, by the way. You got to stop sending money everywhere. But I listened to Ratcliffe's testimony, and that's where he made that interesting comment where it's like, my communications had no classified info. They were legal and permissible and whatever, but he didn't say anything about everybody else. I thought that phrasing was really interesting. But yeah, the whole thing was supposed to be about, global security threats, and the left has turned it into everything about the Signal chat. So this is definitely their attack point moving forward. The DOJ cites state secrets privilege to withhold deportation flight details. And tomorrow I'm probably going to have Ash on for a little bit to discuss some other SCOTUS things going on. And we might talk about this a little bit, but this has to do with the Alien Enemies Act, that case, and the Justice Department versus the judge. The judge is trying to get all sorts of information from Trump and the administration. But top Justice Department officials informed a federal judge Monday that the Trump administration is invoking the state secrets privilege to withhold information about deportation flights earlier this month, which are at the center of a legal dispute over whether the government defied judicial orders. The court has all the facts it needs to address the compliance issues before it, Attorney General Pam Bondi and other DOJ officials wrote in a filing. Further intrusions on the executive branch would present dangerous and wholly unwarranted separation of powers harms with respect to diplomatic and national security concerns that the court lacks competence to address. Officials argued that the information sought falls under the state secrets privilege, asserting that its disclosure would pose a reasonable danger to national security and foreign affairs. And then there's another quote here. I'm just going to read the rest of this because the last quote is awesome. It is critical to bear in mind that removal operations can be, as they are here, counterterrorism operations, Rubio wrote. If foreign partners believed that any relevant details could be revealed to third parties, those foreign partners would be less likely to work with the United States in the future. That impairs the foreign relations and diplomatic capabilities of the United States and threatens significant harm to the national security of the United States. The department pushed back on Boasberg's inquiry into whether the administration violated his orders, maintaining that no further details were necessary. Whether the planes carried one Trinidad terrorist or 1,000, or whether the planes made one stop or 10, simply has no bearing on any relevant legal issue. The need for additional information here is not merely dubious or trivial, it is non-existent. The executive branch violated no valid order through its actions, and the court has all it needs to evaluate compliance. The TLDR of everything I just said was the Trump administration said to Judge Boasberg that he can go and suck it, and we'll see how he responds. So that's where we're at. And we'll follow up with Ash on that here later. Tomorrow, not later today. Probably tomorrow. Not confirmed, but probably. We got this. Senator Mike Lee introduces bill to curb judicial overreach. And I think this is an interesting step. He floated this on social media not long ago. And I was like, that might work. Maybe, but you still leave the opportunity for these judges to be corrupted. But anyway, it's fighting back against the unelected radicals in robes. The legislation proposes establishing a 3-judge district court to oversee legal challenges against the executive branch. Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts would appoint the panel, which would include 1 circuit judge and 2 district judges. Right off the bat, I don't like this because the fact that Justice Roberts would be the one appointing the panel, did you know, or you probably do know by now, but Justice Roberts is the one who appointed Boasberg to the FISA court. So his judgment, look at what Boasberg's doing. Can we trust Roberts' judgment? There's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way. I don't know what that way is. I don't know if this is it. This could work potentially, but it still probably won't. So I don't know. But it is interesting. They're the social media influencers we have in our government are pretending to come up with ways and solutions. So this was a pretty interesting story from yesterday. Trump is granting a full pardon to Devon Archer, citing Biden corruption. That's Hunter Biden's former business partner. He's going to receive a full and unconditional pardon. President Trump confirmed that to the New York Post. Trump promised the pardon during a meeting with Archer at the NCAA Wrestling Championships in Philadelphia on Saturday night, which, by the way, those were awesome. If you haven't seen any of the clips from the NCAA wrestling tournament with Trump there, the heavyweight one was pretty epic. Anyway, he's getting a full pardon, Trump stated on Sunday. He was screwed by the Bidens. They destroyed him like they tried to destroy a lot of people. Repeating his commitment, Trump described Archer as an anti-Biden person whose testimony was instrumental in exposing Biden corruption. I remember Archer going on, was it Tucker Carlson? And he gave a bunch of interesting comments and basically completely spelled out, like, yeah, Joe Biden was very aware of what Hunter was doing, and he was very involved. And he was kind of like the closer. Like, he was the name that we would drop. And we call him in the middle of these meetings with foreign partners. And he would just kind of say hi, and he knew exactly what he's doing. And they would get the deals closed. Totally debunking the talking point from the Biden family and administration that Biden had no idea, had nothing to do with Hunter Biden's business dealings. Totally debunked it. But what I'm more so curious about is where this ties into the overall corruption exposure and criminal investigation into the Biden family. Hunter Biden was being looked at. He was gun charges. And I think there was other investigations ongoing outside of just that. And the pardon that Biden signed, I guess not Biden, but the auto pen signed, got him off the hook, and they had to let him go. But now they give Archer a pardon, and Trump has recently said that the pardons that Biden signed by auto pen are invalid. They're null. They're void. Are we going to see a continuation of some other investigation into this? I hope so. It's just really interesting that Archer has been pardoned here. I think there's probably more to this story. There has to be, right? Anyway, we got a new ceasefire plan proposed by Egypt in Gaza. So this is fairly interesting. And the most interesting part is at the end here. Egypt has put forward a new ceasefire proposal aimed at restoring calm in Gaza. The proposal follows a surge in violence after Israel resumed air and ground operations against Hamas last Tuesday, ending a 2-month period of relative calm. Under the plan, Hamas would release 5 Israeli hostages per week, with Israel implementing the second phase of the ceasefire after the first week, according to the sources. Both Hamas and the U.S. have agreed to the proposal, but Israel has yet to respond. The plan would also include a timeline for the release of all hostages in exchange for Israel's full withdrawal from Gaza, with U.S. guarantees backing the arrangement. Hamas has accused Israel of violating the terms of the January ceasefire, but has stated it remains open to negotiations. It's fascinating to me. You can almost compare Israel to Ukraine. The people were told are the bad guys, Russia and Hamas. And Hamas is, I'm not saying they're not bad guys. I'm not saying Russia's not bad guys either. But the people that we are being conditioned by the media to view as the good guys, which is Ukraine and Israel, are the ones that are slowest to respond to the peace deals. it was Zelensky in the first round of negotiations that wouldn't agree to anything. And then he threw that tantrum and got kicked out of the White House. And now we have Hamas and the U.S. agreeing to a proposal, but Israel hasn't yet. But yet Israel's the one that we're supposed to be like seeking peace from for on behalf of. Like the whole thing is crazy. The whole thing. And Ghost kind of said that the reason they picked back up on the fighting, there's more to the story. We'll have to have him on again. If you haven't, make sure you guys catch his Friday weekly recap of the geopolitical stuff, because he does a great job with that. Let's see what else I got for you guys here. CNN is being kind of interesting with how they're covering this scandal. I know this is kind of going back to something we already talked about, but the biggest scandal of Trump 2.0 is no scandal at all on mega media. They're trying to criticize mega for not covering the story or for giving away the story, which I kind of get that. Like, if this was a legitimate leak, that we should be concerned about how this was done. Like, we shouldn't just forgive it away just because it's Trump. If you're going to be like honestly and truthfully objective about the information you receive, it shouldn't matter. Like, you shouldn't be explaining away a situation just because it came from the guy that you said won the fake election, right? That you wanted to win the fake election. If this leak was genuine, Mike Walls has some egg on his face. Even if Trump is out here defending him, this could have been much worse. So they kind of have a point here. If I'm just being honest and objective, which I try to be most of the time. There's a few stories on Fox News I thought were kind of notable. Connecticut ballot fraud saga leads GOP to alert Bondi after 150 charges lodged. Dem reforms missed the mark, they say. So there's more than 150 charges filed against several Bridgeport figures in the latest case. So this is an election reform. It's ballot fraud concerns stretching back to a judicially overturned 2023 election in Connecticut's largest city. They're trying to reform the system, even though we were told that ballot fraud cannot exist on a scale to alter the outcome of an election. Maybe they just meant a presidential election and not the largest city in Connecticut. But they're looking into it. So that's progress. That's what we've been wanting, right? At least that's what I've been wanting. And so that's notable. But then there's more. This is kind of election related. Rosie O'Donnell questions validity of Trump's 2024 election win, wants Musk's influence investigated. You know what? I question the validity too. We should be questioning the validity of all elections. Just because Trump won, I still think the election was fake and fraudulent, full of fraud. All needs to be investigated. We have this in Nevada. Nevada investigates more than 300 potential voter fraud cases from 2024 election. That seems like a lot. According to a report from the Nevada Secretary of State, an investigation into 303 cases of double voting is underway. So good news, making progress. I want to see this everywhere. Trump is continuing to hammer. I think he even had a statement yesterday, the day before, where he's talking about, voter reform. So that's good. That's progress. We like progress. We got, let's see what else. Hold for processing. This is pretty notable. Social Security conducting major records cleanup, marking 7 million listed age 120 plus as deceased. Doge says there remain millions of people with impossible ages who are eligible for Social Security checks. I don't know how many of these were actually being sent out. They went through approximately 7 million number holders, all listed age 120 plus, have now been marked as deceased. Another 5 million to go. But how much money have we sent these people that were dead? The answer should be zero, but we know it's been happening. It's not okay. Dem Senator calls for Waltz Hegseth to resign. I already showed this earlier, but I'm just clicking through my tabs in order here now. So I just got a couple more stories, I think. We got this from CNN.
Let's take a look at the percentage of the country who say that we're on the right track. It's actually a very high percentage when you compare it to some historical numbers. What are we talking about? According to Marist, 45% say that we're on the right track. That's the second highest that Marist has measured since 2009. How about NBC News? 44%. That's the highest since 2004. Wow. The bottom line is the percentage of Americans who say we're on the right track is through the roof. And if you were to compare it to when presidents have historically been reelected, of course, Trump has not constitutionally eligible to run for re-election, but I think it sort of puts it in perspective. 42% of the country says the country is on the right track when the incumbent party is re-elected. And also keep in mind, back when Kamala Harris lost and the Democrats were turned out of power, only about 27 to 28% of the country said the country was on the right track. The bottom line is right now, a much higher percentage of the country says we're on the right.
What I love about this is, even though I don't trust the polls, think they're fake, whatever, they're only used to create a narrative. But at a certain point, you almost have to at least come relatively close to reality, if that makes sense. Like, you can't have a 70% margin between what you're trying to say on TV versus what the actual polls that you're conducting say. Like, I don't think it's possible to make that math work. Like, they can be as biased as they want to be in the data, which I would love to look at the data, but at some point, like, you're going to have to be relatively close to the truth. So they say 44% or 45% approval rating. I would wager it's well over 60, maybe even close to 70%. And I'm not, it's probably even higher than that. When you just look at when you feel the atmosphere in this country, whether it's social media or just out and about, just generally, this country is fully supportive of Trump and they like what we're seeing for the most part. Okay. So when they have to come out here and say these numbers, which is a 17% increase since December or November of 2024, the election, this is a big deal. And then at the bottom there, it says average for when an incumbent party is reelected is 42%. They're already basically, yeah, well, this is looking good for reelection or for this party, whatever. But the craziest thing about it is they have to do this. They have to come out here and say everybody is in support of what this Trump administration is doing. The U.S. is on the right track finally. And then the rest of their show is all going to be like, yeah, so this is why Trump is the worst. This is why what this administration is doing is the worst. Like, they will show this and then try to gaslight you into Trump and Musk are Nazis. They're trying to get rid of your healthcare. They're trying to do all these things. Must destroy all Teslas. It's just really funny to me when we get to watch these people do this. Like, it's got to be torture for them. Not that they care. They don't care about lying to people. They've been doing it forever. Anyway, did you guys know that dieting or diets are racist?
The same diets as white women, we lose less weight and we lose it slower, even when we're following the diet, than our white women counterparts. It's literally that the racism that you're experiencing and the struggle to make ends meet actually means the diet don't work for you the same.
So, and I mean, I'm almost like blown away by that clip because, well, first, everybody's body's different. Everybody's going to respond to things differently. Number one, but to come out and call diets racist, that's pretty funny. I don't even know what else to say on that without probably upsetting some people. It's just crazy to me that people like that exist with that kind of thinking, is what I mean. Anyway, that might actually be all the stories I had, but I do want to highlight this. If I would have known I was going to be 10 minutes early, I would have kept Gabrielle on for a little bit longer because she had so much good information. Make America wealthy again. More investment and jobs and more money in American pockets. Hyundai this week announced the $20 billion investment in the United States, which was $5.8 million for a new steel plant in Louisiana, which would create a bunch of jobs, 1,500 jobs. So $5.8 billion creates 1,500 jobs. How much is like 2 trillion? Because I think we're over 2 trillion now in investment in the United States. I wonder how that's going to equate to jobs. I wish they'd talk about that more, like try to put it in perspective of jobs, because, and most of these are probably going to be pretty high paying jobs too. Like, these are going to be good jobs, and they're going to be jobs that won't be taken by illegal aliens. This is the part of it that, when we hear that, oh, we're getting this great investment in the United States from all these different companies, there's not enough focus put on the job numbers and how that's going to affect the economy in that way too. Or maybe there is, and I just don't see it because not many people talk about it. They should, while they're saying the investment numbers, they should say estimated jobs gained from this. When you deport the illegal aliens, the recession we're going into, guys, isn't going to be much of a recession. So, but this is again the list that we have so far. I'm pretty sure it's over 2 trillion. Oh, it's definitely over 2 trillion. Maybe over 3 trillion. close to 3 trillion. It's amazing to see, guys. It's really exciting times. But okay. Any questions or thoughts from the chat? Otherwise, 4 trillion, says Old Rusty in the chat. Thank you. I want to show you guys something here. So I teased this yesterday. We are doing a Nashville Badlanders meetup. It is confirmed. I'll post this on social media here after the show. But on Saturday, April 5th, I'm going to be down in Nashville for, it's a friend of mine, their anniversary party, a little get together. I'm going to that. But while I'm down there, I'm like, hey, let's get a Badlanders meetup together and get some face-to-face time. If you're in the area, I would encourage you to come to these. These things are so good. It's so good to just get together with like-minded individuals. But I'm actually going to be at this one too, which is going to make it just that much more special. From 2 to 4 p.m. at the Cellar Bar in Nashville, Saturday, April 5th. The key here is, though, we need you guys to RSVP, because if by chance we get too big of a group, we're probably going to have to find a different location than the Cellar Bar. And if you RSVP, we'll have your contact information to let you know that we might be changing scenery, right? So if you can go, and I'm not saying you guys should like drive or fly in from a different, just for this 2-hour meetup. Like this isn't like a GART event where we're there for a full weekend. It's just a quick 2-hour, 3-hour meet and greet. But make sure you RSVP to Eat More Plants to Thrive at protonmail.com. It's on the screen there. You'll see it, and I'll post about it. But please RSVP so we can get a good head count and make sure we're in the appropriate venue. But it'd be very cool to Diet M in the chat says, can I use Signal to RSVP? You sure can, but we will leak your RSVP information to everybody. But all right, I think I'm going to wrap it up here, unless you guys have anything else you want me to comment on. Because I got a couple minutes. Otherwise, I'll be right back with the rants. And then, oh yeah, I got to go read to my son's class today for a little bit. I got to be there in about 45 minutes. So maybe I will just wrap it up and do the rants. That way I can get over there early. So let's do that. We'll close out the show. I'll be right back with the rants. And otherwise, hit that thumbs up. I'd greatly appreciate it. Make sure you guys head over to our live coverage and stick around Badlands. Should be some great content the rest of the day.
Let's get started.
That's what she said.
Oh, that's real good.
Why to stop to me?
All right. Couple rants here. Sean Joe says, great guest. Yeah, she was really good. She was really smart. Really good background knowledge, too, with the IT side of things. So perfect guest to have on for the story. And we'll definitely have her back. There's another story about the Afghanistan withdrawal she was going to talk about, but just didn't have time. I guess now we had time, but at the time, I didn't know if we had time. 12 Indie Boy, I see a tie. Do we see Trump punish one of his own cabinet before the world wakes up to others that mishandled classified info? That's an interesting question. So far, he's can't come out in support of Mike Waltz, but handling the classified information has been a theme for a few years now, going back to 2016, starting with Hillary Clinton and maybe even before that even. But in terms of what I remember and how long I've been awake, it started with Hillary Clinton and the whole, bleach bit stuff, the Clinton server. And it's been a theme all the way through up until now. And so are we having, is that the reason for this? Is there a discussion that needs to be had about classified information and how it's handled? Or what? I don't know. Interesting point. Interesting question. But thanks, everybody. I will see you guys tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Daily Herald.